Good afternoon, students. Today we are going to start with the next topic called outbreeding devices or contrivances for pollination. Let's talk about outbreeding devices. There are certain plants which have developed certain mechanism in order to prevent the self-pollination, right? Okay, so when you talk about cross-pollination, to favor the cross-pollination and to increase the genetic variability in plants, there are certain sexual strategies which have been developed that is generally called as outbreeding devices. So let's talk about the outbreeding devices. The first outbreeding devices is unisexuality, right? Uni stands for one, right? Okay, so unisexuality, here the unisexual flowers are generally present on the different plants. Now, unisexual flowers are the flowers which will contain either male or the female gamete. This is called also as dioecium. Now, here, as the unisexual flowers are present, it will generally avoid the self-pollination. Self-pollination is not possible. It may be monoecious plant or dioecious plant. Monoecious means a single plant having male and a female flower, and dioecious means two different plants are present, right, having distinct male and the female flower. The best example for the monoecious plant is maize, and the best example for the dioecious plant is papaya or mulberry. Second outbreeding devices is dichogamy. Di stands for two and gamy stands for marriage, right? Now, when I talk about dichogamy, dichogamy is a type of a device where the maturation of the anther and the stigma takes place at two different times. That means that the maturation of the androecium and the gynoecium takes place at two different times. Dichogamy is of two different types. First is called as protandry and second is called protogyny. First one, protandry. Pro stands for first and andry stands for androecium. So protandry is a type of a condition where the development or the maturation of the androecium will be done first and then followed by the gynoecium. That is, the maturation of the anther is first and then followed by the stigma. That is called protandry. The best example for the protandry is sunflower, right? Second is protogyny. Proto stands for first and gyne stands for gynoecium. So what happens in protogyny is that in protogyny, the maturation of the gynoecium will take first and then followed by the androecium. That is, the stigma will be matured earlier and then followed by the anther. The best example for protogyny is gloriosa or 4 o'clock plant, which is also called as Mirabilis jalapa, right? The third outbreeding devices is prepotency. Pre is earlier. Now, what happens in the prepotency is that the germination of the pollen grain of other flower takes place on the stigma much more quickly or rapidly rather than the pollen grain which is present on the same flower, right? Isn't it? It means that germination of the pollen grain of other flower takes place more rapidly on the stigma as compared to the pollen grain which is generally present on the same flower, right? That's why it is generally called as prepotency. The best example for the prepotency is apple. Fourth one, that is fourth outbreeding devices is heterostyly. Hetero stands for different and styly stands for style. So here the flowers are generally going to produce two different length of the style. So example, in a plant like primrose, there are 2 to 3 different types of a flower having different location of the stigma and anther. It means that stigma and anther are generally located on different location, right? If the stigma and anther are placed at two different points, then the pollen grain cannot easily pollinate on the stigma of a flower. This process is generally called as heterostyly. The best example is primrose, right? Next one, that is fifth one, is generally called as hercogamy. Hercogamy is the only mechanical device which is generally used to prevent self-pollination. Now, what happens in hercogamy is that this generally takes place in a plant like example calotropis, right? Calotropis is a type of a plant where penta-angular, right? Penta-angular stigma is generally developed over the anther, that is hercogamy. And the last one, sixth one, is generally called self-sterility or self-incompatibility. Self-sterility is the only genetic mechanism where, or you can say it is the only genetic mechanism due to which the germination of the pollen grain on the stigma of the same flower is inhibited, right? It means that the germination of the pollen grain on the stigma of the same flower is avoided. As the germination will not take place, the pollen grain will not deposit on the stigma of the flower, and as the pollination will not take place, there is no fertilization, and that's why the process is called as self-sterility or self-incompatibility. The best example for the self-sterility is tobacco and potato. Thank you.